Paris was a hill, a swamp, and a forest 5,000 years ago. The river curled around a small island, and that was about it. If you looked at one of the earliest detailed maps of the city, drawn in 1552, you'd see fields, orchards, vineyards, and gardens woven right through its streets. Nature wasn't decoration back then, it was daily life. And then, over centuries of cobblestone and concrete, Paris paved over almost all of it. Today, just 9.5% of Paris is public green space. For a city that markets itself on beauty, that number is shockingly low. But something has been shifting, quietly at first, and now with real momentum. Paris is trying to become a garden city again, along an abandoned railway ring called the Petite Ceinture, in its river, in its cemeteries. And the results are already stranger and more wonderful than you'd expect. Start with the tracks. The Petite Ceinture is a 32-kilometer railway ring built in the 19th century to supply the last defensive wall of Paris. It was the city's first metropolitan rail service. But as the metro expanded, the Petite Ceinture fell silent. By 1934, most of it had been abandoned, and then nature did what nature always does when humans leave. It moved in. That forgotten loop now hosts over 200 species of wild plants and 70 species of animals. In the 15th arrondissement alone, there's a 1.5-kilometer stretch that looks nothing like the manicured parks Paris is famous for. It's tangled and overgrown. Wildflowers push through rusted rails. Butterflies drift between old signal posts. Along one renovated section, a venue called La Recyclerie has transformed a former station house into a working urban farm. Chickens and vegetable patches where commuters once queued. Since 2006, the city and SNCF Réseau, the state-owned rail company, have been carefully regreening sections of the track, not bulldozing and replanting, but guiding what was already growing there. The Petite Ceinture sits just meters from the Boulevard Périphérique, an 8-lane highway used by more than 1 million cars a day, and yet walking along those old tracks, you'd never know it. That contrast captures something essential about what Paris is attempting. This isn't rewilding in the way you might picture it, wolves roaming through Montmartre. It's subtler. It's the decision to stop fighting nature in the gaps and start welcoming it. The political engine behind much of this transformation was Anne Hidalgo, who became the first female mayor of Paris in 2014. The story doesn't begin with her, though. The first real push towards sustainability came under Bertrand Delanoë, who served as mayor from 2001 to 2014. Hidalgo inherited that foundation and then accelerated it dramatically. She also took the city's ambitions global. From 2016 to 2019, she chaired C40 Cities, the network of nearly 100 world capitals coordinating on climate action, giving Paris's green transition an international platform and policy weight it hadn't had before. Under her administration, Paris planted over 200,000 trees, with a pledge to add 170,000 more. The city already has roughly 500,000 trees across its woods, parks, and cemeteries, most notably the Bois de Vincennes to the east and the Bois de Boulogne to the west, the two great forest parks that have anchored Parisian green space since the days of Napoleon III, and the ambition is to push that number much higher. The target for 2030 is striking: 50% of the city's ground area covered by water-permeable surfaces, including green roofs, tree-lined avenues, mini gardens, and new parks. Back in 2013, that figure sat at just 29.6%. Not everyone loves this. Critics, particularly political opponents and suburban commuters, accused Hidalgo of penalizing drivers. Over 1,300 kilometers of bike lanes were added under her watch, and while cycling surged by 240% between 2018 and 2023, bus riders found themselves stuck in newly created traffic jams. Environmentalists pushed back too, but from the opposite direction. When the city began planting dense clusters of trees on places like the Place de Catalogne and calling them urban forests, Christine Nedelec, president of France Nature Environment Paris, was blunt about it. "A forest is not a plantation of trees, but an ecosystem," she said. "It is not a forest, but a grove." That's a fair point, but the biodiversity numbers tell a compelling story, regardless of the terminology. Paris now shelters around 2,150 animal species, including over 1,600 species of insects, 11 species of bats. Among them, the common pipistrelle, which hunts along the Seine at dusk. more than 150 species of birds, including gray herons that now stalk the Canal Saint-Martin in broad daylight, and 32 species of fish in the once polluted Seine. Koi poo, those large beaver-like rodents originally from South America, have colonized the Canal Saint-Martin. And then there are the foxes. In April 2020, during the COVID lockdown, Benoit Gallo, the conservateur of Père Lachaise cemetery, walked through the deserted grounds and came face to face with a fox cub. It looked at him. He looked at it. Groundskeepers had already captured a pair of foxes and their 4 cubs on camera, and around 10 foxes now live in the cemetery. Gallo later wrote about the experience, saying, "For me, it was a symbol of recovery. The return of the foxes during lockdown was such a strong contrast. People at that time were talking only of death, 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 but here were these baby foxes." He's since become something of a celebrity through his Instagram account and his book, The Secret Life of a Cemetery. Père Lachaise, it turns out, is not just a place for the dead. It's become a genuine urban wildlife sanctuary, in part because the city banned pesticides in cemeteries back in 2011. And then there's the Seine. Swimming in the river had been banned since 1923. In 1990, Jacques Chirac, then mayor of Paris, declared he would clean up the Seine and swim in it within 3 years. He never did. He died in 2019 with that promise unfulfilled. Hidalgo picked up that thread. A $1.5 billion cleanup launched ahead of the 2024 Olympics connected over 20,000 homes that had been dumping wastewater directly into the river to the sewer system. A massive underground storage basin near Austerlitz, capable of holding over 50,000 cubic meters of wastewater, roughly 20 Olympic swimming pools, was built to intercept overflow during heavy rains. On July 17, 2024, 9 days before the Olympic torch was lit, Hidalgo swam in the Seine herself. Was it perfect? Not exactly. Some Olympic swimmers reported illness after competing in the river, and bacterial levels turned out to be highly variable. But by the summer of 2025, something extraordinary happened. On July 5th, 3 natural swimming sites opened to the public. For the first time in over a century, Parisians could swim in their own river, and by that summer, 100,000 people had done exactly that for free. One of the most quietly radical structures in all of this is a building. In the 13th arrondissement, the M6B2 tower was designed as a seed building. Its facade hosts trees and plants sourced from forests in the Île-de-France region. And when the wind blows, the structure disperses first-generation seeds into its surroundings. That's a building that literally plants forests, and that's not a metaphor. As Hidalgo's term ended in March 2026, the question became whether any of this would survive her departure. So far, the answer is yes. Emmanuel Grégoire, her former deputy and frontrunner in the mayoral election, pledged to continue the green transition, including expanding the urban forest program, accelerating the Seine water quality monitoring network, and committing to car-free zones in 6 additional arrondissements by 2028. A citizen vote showed that nearly 66% of Parisians supported greening and pedestrianizing 500 new streets. The Parc de la Villette, 40 years after its inauguration, opened its new 15,000 square meter urban farm in March 2026, the largest renovation in the park's history. It is worth remembering that the Paris of broad boulevards and uniform stone facades was itself a radical act of re-engineering. Baron Haussmann demolished medieval Paris in the 1850s and 60s on Napoleon III's orders, ripping out the old city to lay the geometric street grid we recognize today. He planted the first 100,000 trees along those new avenues. He created the Bois de Boulogne and Bois de Vincennes as deliberate lungs for the city. What Hidalgo's Paris is doing is, in a sense, a continuation of that same impulse, choosing deliberately what kind of city to be. Paris isn't pretending to be a wilderness. It's still a city of cafes and traffic and €8 espressos, but it's proving something that matters, that density and biodiversity are not opposites, that a city can choose, deliberately, to make room for foxes and fish and wild moths hatching on a Montmartre rooftop. 5,000 years ago, Paris was a hill, a swamp, and a forest. It's not going back to that, but for the first time in a very long time, it's remembering where it came from.